He was still zipping up his fly when the server room lights died. Not a metaphor. Real lights. Real server room. Real zipper. Matt, the new manager, had dragged me in there an hour earlier, talking about digital asset security audits. What he didn't say was that he already knew what I'd find missing, or rather, what I wouldn't find at all. Every folder I'd worked on for the past 6 months, empty. Every script I'd coded, every mock-up I'd fine-tuned, every system automation tagged under my employee ID, gone. Matt, with his smug Patagonia vest and startup smirk, leaned against the rack like he was posing for VC's LinkedIn banner. Strange, he said. Must be a sync error. A sync error doesn't scrub metadata. A sync error doesn't replace my version with his, timestamped at 2:43 a.m. on a Sunday, when the office was locked and his keycard had been accidentally deactivated for maintenance. I checked. I didn't say any of that. I just stared at him, watching the corners of his lips twitch like he wanted to laugh. Like this was a test to see how far I'd bend before I snapped. He should have known I don't snap, I reconstruct. So what now, I asked, calm, measured. He tilted his head, fake concerned. Well, unless you can produce original copies, I'm afraid legal will have to assign authorship to the latest saved versions. Beat, which are all under my name, apparently. That's when I felt it, that click, that spine-deep cold that says they've planned this. What he didn't know, and wouldn't find out until much, much later, is that the version control system we use has gaps. Gaps that I mapped 2 years ago after my old boss tried a similar stunt. I never said a word. I just started running hourly backups. Offsite, encrypted, pay-per-use cloud archive under a pseudonym tied to a Shell LLC in Vermont, even registered it from a gas station Wi-Fi. Let's be clear, I built the architecture they now pretend to own. I bled for those builds, cried once, alone in the stairwell at 3 a.m. when I couldn't get the migration to pass QA. I gave them solutions that saved $1.3 million in client churn and earned Matt a standing ovation from the board for my work. But this wasn't about credit anymore. This was about erasure. He didn't just want the work. He wanted me wiped from the ledger, gone like dust on a wiped whiteboard. As I left the server room, he called after me, "Don't take it personally." I paused. "No," I said without turning. "I'll take it strategically." He laughed like I was joking. But that's the thing with people like Matt. They never see it coming when the punch lines them. The day after the server room incident, HR emailed me a revised org chart. My name was no longer listed under Infrastructure Systems Lead. It had been replaced with Matt Thompson, Acting Director, Digital Architecture. Acting Director, my ass. That role didn't exist until he carved it out of my job and stapled a new title over the corpse. The real cherry? A calendar invite for a collaborative debrief about Q3's wins and upcoming projects, with Matt listed as the primary presenter. I didn't decline the invite. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I showed up, and I brought popcorn, figuratively. He strutted in 10 minutes late, clicked open a slide deck I'd built down to the animations, and started blabbering about revolutionizing pipeline stability. Same bullet points I'd pitched back in April, except now they were dressed in his buzzwords and padded with AI nonsense. He even mispronounced Kubernetes. People nodded like he was Moses parting the DevOps sea. That's when I felt the tension in my gut give way to something cleaner, colder. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was watching and recording. Because 2 nights earlier, when I'd sat in my apartment floor surrounded by empty takeout containers and 2 monitors glowing like altars, I didn't just check my private backup server. I spun up a digital duplicate of the company's cloud structure. Mirrored folder names, identical file paths. Timestamps frozen. Looked like his version until you clicked. Then came mine. The originals, untouched, annotated with Git logs pointing directly to my commits. I could prove authorship down to the keystroke, but I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. He needed to feel safe first. Let him gloat. Let him leak confidence like a slow tire on a gravel road. And oh, he did. He started leaving doors open, figuratively and literally. I found a USB stick jammed into the shared kitchen Mac, syncing files to his Dropbox. Left unattended, like no one could possibly betray him. Arrogance like that doesn't just blind you, it neuters your instincts. Then came Friday. Our VP of Engineering, Claudia, pulled me aside. "You're not on the roadmap call for the client renewal," she said. I played dumb. "Oh," she hesitated. Matt says you've stepped back to focus on documentation. He didn't want to overburden you. Overburden, like I'm some frail antique. I smiled. That was thoughtful of him. She frowned. It didn't sound like your idea. I tilted my head. It wasn't. We both paused. Something passed between us. Unspoken, tense. She didn't say help me prove it, and I didn't say I already have. But I could feel the tide shift. Claudia's smart. She's seen this pattern before, and like Matt count on women like me, folding under politeness and plausible deniability. They forget we don't need their permission to sharpen knives. I walked out of that conversation with a plan and Claudia's unspoken blessing. He was about to present our entire client migration strategy next week. The same strategy he claimed he built from scratch. Good. Let him. Because I had already replaced 2 key API tokens in his deck with dead links. I knew exactly which slide would crash in front of the board. Live. But that was just the foreplay. The real show? It was loading on a private link, and only I held the key. Tuesday morning, 9:04 a.m. The boardroom blinds were half drawn, the air smelled like burnt Nespresso, and Matt strolled in like he'd just invented Ethernet. Tan too deep for an Ohio autumn, probably fake-baked between screwing me over and Googling how REST APIs work. Claudia sat at the head of the table, stone-faced. The CTO nodded politely. Marketing lead whispered something to legal. Nobody made eye contact with me. He launched his deck. Slide 1, revolutionizing the migration framework. Slide 2, client-centric cloud logic. Slide 3, secure token deployment live demo. Click. Nothing. The token link spun, hung, and spat out a 403 error with a nice little timestamp and the label unauthorized. Valid credential signature. Contact original administrator. His jaw stiffened. Fingers stuttered on the trackpad. You okay there, Matt? Claudia asked, cool as an autopsy. He clicked again. The next slide loaded, but half the embedded schema was missing. I watched him sweat through his bonobos like it was an Olympic event. CTO leaned forward. This demo doesn't reflect the latest deployment protocol. Where's the container security sequence? Matt muttered, it's cached. I don't know why it's not syncing. Maybe a merge conflict. Nope. It wasn't syncing because I swapped the repo endpoint at 2 a.m., replaced it with a dummy structure, and revoked the AWS key associated with his cloned project. He'd copied the interface, but forgot one thing. I'd hard-coded the final auth handshake to route through a proxy tagged with a silent trace. In short, he was presenting my work through his dummy shell. It was tripping every wire I planted. Claudia tapped her pen. Matt, would you say this architecture was developed entirely by you? He blinked. Well, yes. I mean, obviously I collaborated with the team, but the foundational elements were built under my direction. God, he actually believed that would fly, that they wouldn't verify, that I wouldn't have receipts. She nodded slowly and looked at me. Is that accurate? And here's the moment the kind Matt types always underestimate. The woman they tried to erase stops playing nice. No, I said, pulling a small flash drive from my jacket. This contains the live development logs, commit history, and security tokens for every build phase from the past 9 months. All timestamped, all attributed. You'll see the last legitimate structure ended under my admin tag. Everything afterward, including Matt's version, forked off a corrupted clone. No backups, no redundancy, no legal right to use. Silence. You could hear the air conditioner kick on. Or maybe that was just Matt's soul exiting through his sweat glands. I plugged the drive in, opened the logs, clicked play on a screen capture showing him accessing restricted directories at 2:43 a.m. using a spoofed shell ID. And right at the end, a frame-by-frame shot of the deletion script firing on every folder tagged under my user profile. Claudia didn't speak for 6 full seconds. Then she said, "Can we pause the meeting? Legal, stay. Everyone else, give us the room." Matt started to object. "This is absurd." No, she cut in, eyes sharp. "What's absurd is thinking you could bury someone this capable and leave no trace. You underestimated the wrong engineer." And then, as people stood up to file out, she leaned across the table and said, with just enough volume for us to hear, "You just presented stolen IP to the board." Matt's hands were shaking. I sat there, quiet, because the next move was mine. That afternoon, he tried damage control. Slack pings, let's talk, calendar invites, clarify misunderstanding. Even a bouquet of sunflowers sent to my desk with a card that said to New Beginnings M. I left them in the hallway by the janitor's closet. Let the mold have them. At 5:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. A blocked number, I answered. His voice, low and breathless. "You don't have to do this." I said nothing. "I get it. I went too far," he kept going. "But do you really want to blow this up? You're smart, you're respected. We could say it was a miscommunication, joint authorship, shared credit. Hell, I'll even backdate the revisions." I finally spoke. "You want mercy, Matt?" Silence. "I don't do mercy, I do backups." Click. I hung up. By 6:30 p.m., legal had already emailed me a formal request to hand over the server backup files. They wanted to verify IP ownership, chain of custody, and whether the API keys I presented could legally be used to invalidate Matt's version. I replied with a ZIP folder and a timestamped invoice from my cloud host, listing every time I paid out of pocket to preserve what their infrastructure lost. I added, "Please note this was not a company-mandated backup. This was done on personal initiative for redundancy protection. No NDAs cover this server. Ownership is mine." 20 minutes later, legal asked for a meeting, not with Matt, with me. Claudia was already in the glass-walled office when I arrived. She stood, nodded at the rep, and said, "Before we begin, I want it on record that I warned senior staff months ago we were underutilizing her. This company doesn't deserve her, but we need her." Let's start there. Legal, for once, didn't posture. They just asked for clarity. I gave them access logs, change histories, 3 emails Matt forwarded to clients using templates I wrote, word for word. Then I pulled out the big one. "Your compliance policies state that all code pushed to production must be vetted by 2 engineers," I said, scrolling on my laptop. This, I pointed to a snapshot of Matt's unauthorized push from Sunday at 2:43 a.m., was a solo push, using elevated privileges he wasn't granted yet. Legal went pale. "That's grounds for termination under your own protocol," I added, "and client liability if it caused a breach." Which, by the way, it almost did, because his patch opened a recursive call loop that nearly crashed the billing API during stress testing. Silence again. Claudia turned to legal. "So what are you offering her? Promotion? Oversight? Or does she get her own damn department?" But I wasn't done, because Matt's panic had made him stupid. That night, I checked my server logs again and found a failed login attempt from a proxy IP linked to his name. Idiot tried to brute force my private archive. I had it recorded with a trace. I smiled, opened a new tab, and submitted it to IT security under the subject line, "Attempted breach of private infrastructure by internal actor." Let him chew on that. But I still hadn't pulled the last pin. Not yet, because sometimes revenge needs more than just evidence. It needs audience. The thing about people like Matt, they don't just crave control, they need a stage. A spotlight, applause, that's their oxygen. So if you want to choke them out, you don't block their access. You turn the spotlight back on and let it roast them alive. The quarterly client summit was 3 days away. Big money in that room, investors, partner reps, press liaisons, and one very specific tech journalist who once called our department the brainstem of digital innovation. Matt was scheduled to present the infrastructure overhaul that he supposedly architected himself. They hadn't pulled him from the docket yet. Why? Because legal moves slow and reputation damage moves fast. But me, I don't wait for permission. I write the fire drill. The day before the summit, I sent Claudia a message. Subject, backup plan attached. Infrastructure overhaul authenticated build chain real. PDF recommend printing this version instead of Matt's. Also, check slide 16. Mishi opened it within 5 minutes, 3 dots, typing, stopped, started again. Claudia, slide 16 is savage. Let's talk. Slide 16 was simple, a screenshot of our GitLab timeline, highlighting every single commit under my ID, followed by Matt's forked copy and the metadata trail he tried to erase. But the real kicker, underneath the screenshots, in big red text, if he built this himself, why did he clone it at 2:43 a.m.? The summit kicked off in a rented hotel ballroom, lined with fake plants and even faker handshakes. I watched from the back, laminated badge around my neck like I belonged there. Because I did. Matt stood at the podium in his tailored blazer, beaming like a politician who still thinks the scandal hasn't leaked. 5 minutes into his speech, Claudia took the stage. "Before we continue," she said into the mic, "I'd like to publicly acknowledge the real architect behind our migration success. The woman who wrote the code, preserved the backups, and protected our entire back-end system from a near-catastrophic overwrite on her own dime. She turned, looked directly at me. "Would you mind joining us on stage, please?" The room turned. Matt froze mid-sip. I walked the aisle with my shoulders square, ignoring the burn of his stare. Claudia handed me the mic. "Tell them what you found, if you're comfortable." I took a breath, not nervous, not shy. Just ready. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that a senior team member had overwritten proprietary infrastructure with cloned code and then attempted to scrub the origin records. What they didn't know is that I run a private encrypted backup system that logs every version, including the one they deleted. Murmurs. Camera phones lifted. Matt stepped back, hands twitching. I continued. What followed was a pattern of falsified ownership, unauthorized admin access, and a cover-up that endangered compliance with multiple client contracts. I brought this to leadership, and instead of burying it, they asked me to speak. Claudia smiled. "We believe transparency matters." I handed the mic back, walked off stage to a ripple of applause. Matt stayed up there, twitching, his face pale and his blazer suddenly too tight. He didn't speak again for the rest of the summit, but I wasn't finished. Because while he was melting under the ballroom lights, his Dropbox, the one he used to smuggle code to his freelance buddies on the side, was syncing. And I had the login, because guess what was written on that USB stick in the kitchen Mac? A sticky note. The password, TH0MSON123. The idiot secured his empire with a middle school insult. I opened the folder titled Consulting Gigs, and inside, a goldmine. 16 subfolders, each named after a different company, none of them ours. Verity Biodata, Go Snap Deployment, Draker Pitch Slides. All time-stamped, all modified during work hours. And every last one of them contained some slice of our proprietary code. Slightly tweaked, different font here, renamed variable there, but I knew my builds. My fingerprints were all over them. He didn't just steal from me. He was reselling our infrastructure to competitors. It hit me like cold whiskey to the chest. The sabotage wasn't just about ego. It was a side hustle. He was bleeding us dry from the inside, laundering my architecture into side deals through third-party fronts. If the summit was the spotlight, this was the guillotine. I zipped the entire folder structure, encrypted it, and drafted an email to Claudia and legal titled, IP breach immediate action required attached. Dropbox logs, file hashes matching our current codebase side-by-side screenshots of stolen functions my write-up on potential damages, breach of client confidentiality, and just for flavor, labor law violations if he used our time for those contracts, but I held back on pressing send. Not yet, because justice delivered in silence is easy to bury. I wanted witnesses. The next morning, I booked a private meeting with our internal compliance officer, Deshaun, a guy who once audited an entire division for buying their routers from eBay. He didn't play. I handed him the drive. Said only one thing: if you want to save the company, open that before lunch. By 1:12 p.m., a fire drill was called. Everyone in engineering and IT was ordered to an emergency meeting in the large conference room, except Matt. He was nowhere to be found. I watched from my desk, sipping coffee, while Deshaun and Claudia reviewed the folder contents on the big screen in silence. Every few minutes, someone turned pale. I recognized a few engineers from our competitor firms, people we'd interviewed but didn't hire. And there, in one of the folders, our interview templates emailed from Matt's inbox. He'd been feeding candidates internal documentation so they'd be prepped for questions. No, so they'd build for him on the sly. 3:41 p.m., Matt returned. His keycard didn't work. He knocked. Security let him in. 4 minutes later, he came out white as drywall dust, holding a cardboard box. Jacket gone. Lanyard missing. Mouth open but saying nothing. People whispered. Slack exploded, and I watched him walk out the front doors. No announcement, no statement, just a vanish. But the most delicious part, that summit speech, the one he practiced in the mirror for 2 weeks. The recording went live anyway. Only, Claudia had the editor splice in a message at the end. This presentation was based on the work of my name, whose original architecture secured a successful client migration and exposed internal IP theft. We thank her for safeguarding our systems and our integrity. Matt's name never came up again, and I still wasn't done, because while the company picked up the pieces, I was already building something else, something outside their firewall. I didn't quit. not yet. They offered me his job the following week, director of digital architecture, with a bump in salary, corner office, and a fresh LinkedIn post written by the comms team titled Rebuilding from Within. Cute, flattering, utterly useless. I turned it down. Instead, I requested two things: full data rights to any architecture I had personally authored or backed up offsite, a 6-month transition contract to migrate my systems, train a replacement, and then vanish. They balked. Legal panicked. But Deshaun, God bless him, backed me, reminded them I had technically never signed IP surrender on my offsite backups. And unless they wanted a very public, very messy copyright duel, they'd better get cozy with the idea that I now own the digital spine of their company's most successful product suite. And I was willing to walk. Claudia scheduled a private meeting. "You don't want to stay?" she asked. "I want to build without looking over my shoulder," I said. She nodded. "You're owed that." We didn't shake hands. We clinked mugs. Quiet, mutual respect. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my own apartment, 2 laptops humming, as my private infrastructure project launched into soft beta. Not a company, not yet. A modular platform for migration automation, built entirely from the bones of what they tried to erase. And guess what? That journalist from the summit, the one who watched the whole drama unfold, emailed me after with "You're a ghostwriter turned spotlight sniper." She wrote a feature, titled it "The Woman Who Backed Herself Up." It went viral in under 36 hours. Recruiters flooded my inbox. VCs sniffed around. Old colleagues sent me late-night "you were right" texts that smelled like regret and gin. Even a competitor, Draker, offered me a blank check and said, "Name your team." But I didn't want to join someone else's sandbox. I wanted to own the beach. And then the cherry, an email from Matt, sent from a new domain I didn't recognize, probably one of his side hustle remnants. "You win. They took everything. Hope it was worth it." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I didn't win, Matt. You just finally lost in public." No send. I deleted it, because people like him don't deserve closure. They deserve the echo of silence while the world moves on without them. And mine was just getting louder. 6 months later, I watched him reappear, on LinkedIn of all places, rebranded as a digital transformation consultant. Same smug smile, different buzzwords. Helping companies future-proof their tech stack. No mention of termination. No mention of the blacklisting that followed. Just the algorithmic optimism of someone who thinks the internet forgets. But it doesn't. Former intern tagged me in the comments. "Didn't this guy get caught stealing code last year?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because by then, I wasn't in the comments, I was on stage. My platform, now dubbed Umbra Stack, had just inked its 3rd enterprise contract. The same clients Matt once tried to poach were now sending me NDAs with 6-figure onboarding fees. I gave a keynote at Tech Pulse. Wore black jeans, a blazer, no apologies. Screen behind me showed a phrase I'd etched into the footer of every Umbra Stack page. "If they try to delete you, make sure the backup's live louder." People laughed. They didn't know the origin. That was fine. The people who needed to remember already did. A recruiter from Draker asked afterward if I'd be interested in an acquisition. Said they'd triple my valuation. I smiled and handed them a branded flash drive. "It's not for sale, but it is available by subscription." Nodded, impressed. I walked away before they could speak again. Timing is everything, and Matt, the last I heard, he tried to launch a consulting gig in Phoenix. It fizzled in under 3 months. Someone leaked screenshots from his last employer's internal chat where they called his pitch deck recycled trash with stolen CSS. Poetic. Meanwhile, I kept my promise. I trained my replacement, exported my systems, and walked out of that old company on my own terms. No drama, no farewell cake. Just an empty desk and a legacy that couldn't be wiped. No one clapped when I left, but 3 days later, a junior engineer emailed me. Said she'd been watching, taking notes. Said, "You made me believe we're not disposable." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my dashboard, and watched the server logs roll in. Usage climbing, clients onboarding. Redemption, not as a moment, but as a sustained connection. Because they tried to erase me, but I don't vanish, I version.